Football season is unofficially here. This is the Pick Six Podcast. I'm Evan Bland with Tom Shatel. Sam McKewon's going to join us shortly. And here we go. Tom is back from vacation. I'm back from a few days off as well. And it's a new football season. 3 days in Indianapolis, 18 teams in the Big Ten. Tom, you ready for this brave new era we're about to jump into here?
Yeah, I think so. I'm 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 looking forward to no divisions and just new teams in there and the playoff. I think is going to give more schools hope. It'll bring more people into the picture. So not necessarily Nebraska this year, but yeah, it's I think the Big Ten needs a little life. It's kind of boring to me and. Maybe it'd be more exciting if Nebraska won. I don't know. But yeah, I think there's some intrigue now.
It's a really interesting event, right? I mean, it was in various Chicago ballrooms for many years. We didn't know kind of what hotel it was going to be in from one year to the next. Now it's been in at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis for the last handful. It's a big place. It's pretty cool. Everything takes place on the field with the interviews and everything else. And Sam, what do you think of when you think of Big Ten Media Days? Is this much ado about nothing, or do you take significance from the proceedings this week as we get into the season?
Sometimes there's something that happens at Big Ten Media Days that ends up having a huge ripple effect. Remember Urban Meyer being questioned about Zach Smith in what year was that? 2017, 2018, and
Mhm.
what that became. So there have been times before that's been a large deal. To be very honest with you, I think one of the largest takeaways I have from Big Ten Media Days is just how it can feel like it happens and you're there, but there just doesn't necessarily seem to be a lot of what do you call it, like excitement among the media corps. We were just talking about this before recording, but as of this moment, it's Monday and the event starts tomorrow, and I don't think anybody really knows when anybody's talking off to the side podiums. Like there's no schedule, there's no apparent itinerary. It just feels like the league kind of walks through the thing, and it's almost like yeah, And Tom's mentioned this before that they seem to organize many years. They would organize it around that luncheon, and now they don't have the luncheon anymore. It's almost like they have no purpose. It's very strange. They do the best they can, but I feel like sometimes we walk away from that event having it just doesn't feel like it has as much impact as the SEC football media days does because it feels like a lot of the people are there just out of habit and not out of excitement. And that's something that I think the Big Ten has to try to figure out over time.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, and as a disclaimer, I'm not going this year, but it sure seems like the Big Ten just does this because they kind of have to. I think after COVID, I mean the luncheon, uh, Jim Delaney was really into the luncheon and really into the 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 whole the whole event with the fans and the mascots and the fight songs and autographs and the player who was the speaker and that was kind of the Big Ten identity and that was fine. But I think after COVID that went away, and I think Kevin Warren didn't really want any of that stuff. So uh, the SEC really cares about college football, and they put a lot into their the media days. It's turned into this made for TV event. All their coaches are, if not interesting, at least they try to be interesting. There's usually something to talk about. They have the SEC network, which is all over it. Um, yeah, the Big Ten is if it wasn't for um, you know, if there weren't four teams coming in from the Pac-12 this year, what would anybody talk about this year? Ryan Day be on the hot seat if he is. I mean, there's not much to talk about in this league. So thank God for the Pac-12 boys. But yeah, I think they got the venue right for this event, but they didn't, just and the average fan watching this doesn't care about us. They didn't really, they didn't have a media hotel till late. They just didn't put anything into this, I don't think. And it'll be same old deal tomorrow. The Big Ten Network will be set up in the back. They'll have everybody will go through that, and everybody will be asked about revenue sharing and NIL and um, the playoff and what about the Pac-12 schools coming in and a Rhule will be asked about all those things and Dylan Raiola and probably Evan, Evan Cooper and John Butler and so on and so forth. So yeah, it's just kind of what we do.
The Big Ten is like a late 20 something who goes to bed at 9 o'clock every night and has a very like stringent schedule because they could be a lot cooler if they wanted to be. I mean, they have the defending national champion. They have the team that could be the preseason favorite to win it all this year in Ohio State. They've got Oregon and USC and Penn State. They're making more money than anybody else, and like they're going to show up and they're going to be, kind of bland about it and whatever. Like, if they wanted to be confident and fun and thoughtful, they could be that. And it just kind of it has felt stuffy. And I wonder if it's going to continue to feel that way now that it's a 3-day event with all these new brands. So
Yeah, for sure. The Big Ten needs somebody other than Michigan and Ohio State to be good. And if that team is Penn State, then James Franklin needs to lighten up and actually enjoy things, which he rarely seems to be in a good mood when he goes to Big Ten Media Days, and he's been there for a decade now, so I feel like I can say that with some confidence. This league would be a lot better if Nebraska was really good, because then there'd be some other team there that's not Michigan or Ohio State that people had to deal with, and then all of a sudden Michigan and Ohio State would feel something. So if Oregon's really, really good for 5 years, that's going to make this event a hell of a lot more fun. We'll just have to see.
So how about Nebraska, guys? What are we looking to get out of this thing? Because there have been years where we haven't talked to the Nebraska head coach after the spring game, at least publicly. And that's not the case with Matt Rhule. He spoke in late June. He's been pretty accessible to local and national media for quite a while, fairly regularly since the end of spring ball. So, like, what are we looking to learn? What are we curious to ask in a program that's been more transparent under Rhule maybe than it had been previously?
Well,
Looking for
that's a
energy.
great question. He has talked a lot in the off season. There really isn't. I want to me that besides Evan Cooper and John Butler, maybe asking him about grass and stadium. A lot of the things for Rhule will be what everybody else asks about him, or asks him, and that'll be um, you know, thoughts on revenue sharing, thoughts on NIL, thoughts on the playoff, all this. And so, but as far as Nebraska, it's not really a big year for Nebraska to be a topic around the league. They're building, they're supposedly on their way. Last year was the splash year for Rhule. Nebraska's had those years where they've had a new coach, and so that's kind of the story. Frost's first year was a big deal, but it's I think it's a pretty routine appearance. Now, watch something will happen, but unless there's news tomorrow or I'm sorry, Wednesday, I don't think this is going to be out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I agree. I think one question I probably will ask him is what explanation did you get from the Big Ten when, after all of your road games this season, you didn't get a bye week? So Nebraska has 5 road games, the last of which is Iowa. But the first 4 at Purdue, at Indiana, at Ohio State, at USC. They don't get any bye weeks after. And Nebraska is one of the few schools in the Big Ten that didn't get a bye week after their West Coast trip. So Ohio State goes to Oregon, they get a bye week after. Other teams are going out, they get a bye. Iowa goes out, they get a bye week after. Not Nebraska. And so I think that's probably a burr under their saddle a little bit, that they felt like, yeah, we get a couple of bye weeks in there, but we got back-to-back road games, no bye weeks. Got to go out to USC on, November 16th. Got to turn right around and play Wisconsin right away, like for senior day. So, like, I think there's probably a little bit of a chip on Nebraska's shoulder. They're not probably going to talk about it much. I'm not sure they have a right to talk about it because at the end of the day, they haven't won a lot of football games in recent years. But I think there's probably a just wait and see what we got in store for you. And then of course the Rhule questions. He'll have to answer some of those from national media too. And you can't just blow off the national media so easily. Like the local media will be like, yeah, I know you've told us that there's a quarterback battle, so we won't ask you. But the national media people aren't going to buy. They're not going to do that. They don't care about the conversations we've had with him in spring. So yeah, I think those will probably be the big issues.
Yeah, I really hope that the bye week thing is not an issue. I mean, it's fine to ask about it, but Rhule is sort of a no excuses guy. Just win. I hope he does not dwell on that. That would be kind of a bad look. I mean, they finally have a home game to open the season with. That's something. At this point, they just need to win and not worry about what the Big Ten is or isn't doing to them. It's just I'm tired of all the excuses and the hype. Just win. Go out and win. That's the theme for this year. It's time to win. So, he'll be. I'm sure he'll be good. But yeah, the quarterback issue. They have to say it's a race. That's what they all say, but I think we all know who's going to play. So it's July and August games we play. So it'd be nice to watch a couple of scrimmages, wouldn't it? And maybe see for ourselves. But yeah, I think it's it'd be really something if Rhule was there, but I understand why he's not.
$25, you can go to the NIL funded scrimmage here early next month.
That's right.
No, I agree
expense it.
I agree with all that. I would also add, I think the players will be there. I feel like they're going to be there to spread the good news of Nebraska football. Ben Scott's going to be there to talk about why he transferred and why he stayed. Ty Robinson's going to get asked, 10 times why he came back for a sixth year when he could be in the NFL right now. Isaac Gifford's going to talk about Evan Cooper and about playing for the local school and all that. So I think that'll be probably the side of it that we get from the players. I guess let's kind of expand it again nationally, guys. I mean, we can start with we talked about Oregon State and Sam, we've kind of talked about this a little bit. Like there's this notion, and the Big Ten media poll would confirm this, that Oregon's going to come in and contend with Ohio State atop the league. Are we sleeping a little bit on Penn State being that kind of second team challenger based on what they have, or is Oregon really that much better?
I did pick Oregon second. Did you pick Oregon second in your preseason poll?
I did. Yeah.
They have dueling Big Ten media preseason polls now. They might even have three. It's unbelievable. So anyway, we both did that. So we must have done that for a reason. I think it's Oregon's recent success. I think it's that, you can just kind of see when you watch them play football, the way they play football is just more explosive and dynamic than the way Penn State plays football, especially on offense. Penn State's got a great defense, but Oregon has a pretty good defense and they have a much better offense. And so I think that's part of it. And part of it, honestly, is it's just the whole demeanor of James Franklin. Like he just never seems to be having a very good day. And he's a good coach. Like, let's be clear. He's won a lot of football games there. I think he's won, 70% of his games or very close to it. in a difficult place to play and all the rest. But he just always seems to be a little annoyed, you know. We've seen that many times. I remember very distinctly in 2015 or 2016, Harbaugh's on the main podium with BTN, and they stuck James Franklin behind him and about 5 feet away. And, Franklin was just kind of lost his composure for a minute and was like, I'm sorry, I just can't hear anything, and he was very annoyed. I think I think that's part of it. Dan Lanning's going to come in. I call him the coach to swagoo. He just has a lot of swagger. He's got kind of a crazy grin, and you just get a sense that he loves what he's doing. Whereas James Franklin does not seem to, and he's not bringing his quarterback. Why not bring? I mean, come on. This kid could be the best quarterback in the Big Ten. He was through 25 touchdowns last year. He's not bringing his guy, which immediately makes you think, well, they haven't decided. This kid played great last year, but he may not be the starter this year because they got another kid from Central PA who's more of a runner. And whenever Franklin gets in a tight spot, he turns to the running quarterback. He ran Will Levis out of town. Will Levis, the NFL quarterback, started for the Titans. When he gets in a tight spot, he wants to run his quarterback because he does not really believe in the throw game. Or it doesn't seem to. I think those are the reasons. But this is a big year for Penn State. They need to make the playoff. They would have probably made it 6 times if this were a 12-team version from 2014 to 2023. They would have made it 6 times. They've never made it. This is the year.
Yeah, I'd go with that. I think Oregon on paper is probably in the top 2. We'll know more about it when they host Ohio State. The thing about Penn State is kind of interesting. In their big games last year, they didn't score a lot of points. And they have a new offensive coordinator, guy from KU. So I mean that can go either fast or it might take a while. But I think that they go to USC in October, so we'll know a lot about that. But they do host Washington and Ohio State at home. Yeah, I think they're right there, but obviously Oregon is probably a sexier pick because they're new, and they Lanning has been recruiting well, and so we'll see. I wish Penn State was playing Oregon, but maybe that'll be the championship game. I think we all think Ohio State will be there. We've been to Oregon. That's an interesting place. I'm anxious to see how the Big Ten teams play out there. It's a loud place, but it didn't strike me as being like a real Death Valley or a snake pit or whatever you want to call it. It didn't strike me as a really hard place to play. So I'll be curious to see how the top Big Ten teams do out there.
I think both of the teams have really interesting storylines. For me, the Oregon State one is how do they adjust to the Big Ten? I mean, we all think back to how Nebraska took some time to adjust to the Big Ten style, and Maryland and Rutgers are probably in a different category altogether. But how quickly does Oregon make that transition? I think most people, including us, believe it'll happen fairly seamlessly, but you don't know until they play it out and it's in cold weather and all the rest. And then the Penn State angle that it interests me is I think they benefit as much as any team in the Big Ten with this new 18-team reality because they're not stuck under the thumb of Ohio State and Michigan and having to play those schools every single year. I mean, they don't play Michigan for the first time in 11 years this season, and they had a losing record against them. So, like, what is it? And as you mentioned, Sam, they would have made the CFP maybe half a dozen times in the current setup. So, like, can they take advantage of that? I think that's a team whose perception, because they're not in the East Division, is going to change as much as anyone's in the league.
I think that's very fair. Notably, when Nebraska, Maryland, and Rutgers joined the league, and people may forget this, all 3 of them made bowl games. Most people know that about Nebraska, but so did Maryland and Rutgers. Rutgers, I think, had its best record in its first year in the Big Ten. The adjustment is the years subsequent. And there's where Nebraska struggled. When the Big Ten kind of figured out what Nebraska was all about, they got better. Nebraska stayed the same. And then Rutgers and Maryland both walked through the wilderness for a long time, especially on offense. And so I think Oregon will come in and be just fine. It's what happens in years 3, 4, and 5. USC is the team that I think everybody kind of hopes becomes what USC has always been. And, we're not talking much about them because there is an impression that their head coach is either A, not completely committed to USC, which I don't really know much about, or B, that he left Oklahoma because he didn't want to join the Sooners in the SEC. And so we have in our mind this impression that USC is not going to be very good yet because their head coach is not committed to them being good or something. I'm not sure what it is. And this is a most interesting year for him, because if they're really good in year one, then I think a lot of that stuff goes away. I think if they struggle and they go 8-5 or whatever, and they have a really hard schedule, maybe the hardest in the country, then I think the whispers of, this guy isn't really committed to this place, probably grow louder.
So we made it this far without talking much about the defending national champs. Michigan, 3-time now, isn't it? Big Ten champion. They won the national title last year. And here's what they're replacing. They lose their head coach in Jim Harbaugh. They lost their defensive coordinator. They lost 13 drafted players that included a first-round quarterback, Blake Corum, their top 6 offensive linemen, their top 2 receivers. They probably are going to have a top 5 defense again in the country. Their offense is a total question mark. What do you guys make of what Michigan can be this year in the Big Ten?
Well, I don't think they're going to be in the. That's a lot to lose. You have to, you have to respect the job that Jim Harbaugh did, and the quarterback McCarthy. I mean, and all those guys, offensive line, the defensive play, I mean, everything they had. They were built to go to for the moment last year, and they delivered. I don't think Michigan. I think Michigan will have talent. They probably have a good head coach. We'll see, but I don't think they're going away. But I don't see them playing in the Big Ten title game, and I do not think that they'll be in the playoff either. I think it'll probably be Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. I don't see Michigan in those pictures at all.
I'm with Tom. 9-3, maybe 8-4. Surprised they didn't go get a transfer quarterback in the offseason. That surprised me quite a bit. I thought they would go and do that. And there were some guys available to do it with. Jury's out on whether an offensive line coach can be a great head coach. And he did a great job with that team last year when Harbaugh was suspended. But he also had a cause to play for, and he had a cause to coach for. And they don't have that cause anymore. Nobody feels bad for Michigan. Nobody, they don't have an embattled leader. He's with the Chargers now. So he's going to have to rebuild it in, his own, style and culture. And then I just always have a question about whether guys like that can really understand the importance of the quarterback position. It's so important. And, I do think Matt Rhule understands it, but he's coached both sides of the game, and he's actually been an offensive coordinator too. And so Enmore has as well, but I'll just be curious to see how Michigan handles that position, and whether they want to be this team that runs the ball 900 times and doesn't really know how to throw the football. Because they don't have quite as good of a team this year where they can just control the game with their offensive line. So 9-3, out of the playoff.
Evan, I'll be curious, especially when you guys come back. And we've seen we've heard from all the coaches. I'm curious to see what Lincoln Riley says what his attitude is like.
Me too.
I'm curious. Will there be a team nobody's talking about that could be a playoff team? There's somebody kind of lurking behind the top two or three who could rise up. And I'm also curious, is the Big Ten going to beat each other up? Is there going to be are there going to be any one or two loss teams, or is this going to be a league where the top teams are going to have three losses? They still make the playoff, obviously, but I'm really curious to see how all that's going to work.
Last,
Sleeper team is Iowa.
yeah,
They're the sleeper team. In my opinion.
yeah,
They're
I
they're the
agree.
one that I mean, all they need is moderate quarterback play. I mean,
Yeah,
not horrible, and they got a chance. They'll lose at Ohio State, but the second best team that Iowa plays next year in the Big Ten is Wisconsin. They don't have to play Oregon, USC. Maybe they do play Oregon. I don't know. No, they don't. They don't have to play Oregon, USC, Michigan, Penn State. How does this team do this every year?
They get these breaks all the
Unbelievable to
time.
me how they never have to play a hard schedule.
That's exactly right.
It's unbelievable. When do they play hard teams?
Wouldn't it be? I mean, it'd be the ultimate ironic twist that in the year after the end of the West Division, that's the time Iowa breaks out.
It
Like,
would.
what?
It would. We better get out, Evan.
All right. Well, Sam and I will be in Indianapolis. It's going to be a great 10-hour drive to and from. I know, Tom, you're not going to miss that this year. But we'll see what happens. A lot of personality. It's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe we'll learn a little bit about Nebraska and some of the teams on the schedule here for 2024. For Sam and Tom, I'm Evan. This is the Pick Six Podcast in the Omaha World-Herald. Thanks for listening, Husker fans.